Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to this wonderful event to us. And I'll introduce the speaker very shortly. So just want to remind you that my name is Susan Tai. I'm the Elizabeth Atkins Curator of Asian Art at this museum, and formally welcome you to be here. And I hope you all had a chance to look at the exhibition upstairs. If not, certainly, after the lecture and for the days to come. And this lecture is brought to you with the help of Friends of Asian Art at this museum, and as well as quite a few other supporters, and whose names are listed on the walls next to the title wall. So I hope you'll have a chance to also take a look at that, because we appreciate so much, of their help. And this is the second of the 3 lecture series we're offering before the end of the year. Then the 3rd lecture, I just want to remind you, it's coming up next weekend, next Sunday, by Professor Peter Sturman, who's actually dutifully sitting back there, supporting his colleague here. Yes, and it promises to be another great lecture. So I hope we will see you here then as well. Now, today I'm most honored to be able to introduce Ake Sensabaugh from Yale University, University Art Gallery, from which he retired recently, recently meaning a few years ago. So he's the co-curator of this very important and landmark exhibition that was organized by the China Institute. And he has been involved with China Institute in the past many years. In fact, integral to the major works, major exhibitions that they produce there for many years. And this is only his retired job, one of his many retired jobs. And he retired from being I have to borrow this one now, being the head of Department of Asian Art at the Yale University Art Gallery, and as well as the Ruth and Bruce Dayton Curator of Asian Art there for a few years. And from what I understand that from talking to David, and we all know in the field that he also taught courses at the Yale University, especially after the Professor Barnhart retired a few years ago. And his background, he's a graduate of Stanford University. I just realized I actually have the wrong glasses on. But anyway, we'll try. Okay. A graduate of Stanford University and received his PhD in Chinese and Japanese art and archaeology from Princeton University. And he actually currently remains to be the research associate at the Yale University as well. And his research interests are in the 14th and 15th century Chinese painting and in the art and archaeology of Han Dynasty and southern and northern dynasties, meaning early periods of China, and he will be covering some of the pieces from those periods. And he has researched Eastern Han tombs and is working on a project on Northern Dynasty's tomb paintings, and basically covering geographic regions that cover entire East Asia, China, Korea, and Japan. And I do know one of his part-time retirement jobs is being one of the writers and translator of a major publication that's going to be produced by the time that the opening of the Hong Kong National Palace Museum. I don't know when. It's open now. Oh, I'm sorry. It's open now. Yeah, very recently, but it's the first catalog or book about the exhibition. Oh, no, about the collection. About the exhibition, okay. All right, you can tell us more about it. So today, he's going to enlighten us on the early flower bird Chinese painting, and it's beautifully titled here, Structure and Spirit, Sublimity and Freedom, early Chinese flower bird painting. So please help me welcome Ake Sensabaugh.
Well, thank you, Susan, very much for introducing me and getting me here to Santa Barbara. I had been to Santa Barbara once, many years ago, for an exhibition of Japanese art, and I'm very happy now to come back and be with this show that had originated in New York at the China Institute, and I served as a co-curator for the show in New York, although co-curator is a fancy term because the Chinese did all the selections for the works of art. So, but we pulled the show together in New York. Now, today I am going to be speaking about the again, structure and spirit, sublimity and freedom, early flower and bird painting in China. If we think the depiction of flowers and birds separately, independently, as subject matter, had a very long history in China, going back to the late Neolithic and the Bronze Age. But it was not until in the 7th and 8th centuries of the Tang dynasty that the subjects of birds, flowers and birds were combined in joint compositions of that subject matter. And it led to the creation of then a genre of flower and bird painting. That we know from surviving works of the type that I'm going to be showing you at the beginning, and we know from literature from the 9th century that there was a decided huaniaohua, the depiction of flowers and birds as a genre. Now, it was very well developed already by the 12th century. We know from the Catalogue of the Imperial Collection in the early 12th century, about 1120, the Xuanhe Catalogue of Painting, that there were numerous bird and flower paintings, flower and bird paintings in the collection, and that there were about 5 chapters. There were 5 chapters devoted specifically to the subject of flower and bird painting, more than landscape, more than any other category. So it was a very highly developed category genre already by that point in from its beginnings in the Tang period to the end of the northern Song. So today I want then to address basically that period of time from the Tang period, from the late 7th, but primarily evidence from the 8th century, and take it up through the 12th, 13th century, and then I'll provide a coda which will kind of bridge us over to some of the works which are on display in the gallery. So I'm going to begin with 2 works. They're both things coming out of tombs. The first is the painting on the left-hand side of I don't know whether this will work. The painting on the left-hand side of 2 cranes. It's within a tomb, and unfortunately, the tomb, when it was discovered, was in a farmer's fields, and the archaeologists were allowed to go in. They took photographs of it, but they weren't allowed to disrupt the farmer's fields, so they had to seal the tomb up again. And when they came back several years later to actually be able to excavate the tomb, they found that the paintings were largely destroyed. So we know them basically only from the surviving photographs. One of the things from the excavation of the tomb that they discovered, originally they didn't know whose tomb it was, but when they actually were able to excavate it, they found a tomb epitaph that told us that it belonged to Li Daojian, who was the Prince of Lu, and dated it to 739. So what we see, this is, it's a small tomb, but you go down a pathway into the tomb, and immediately as you go down, this is what you encounter. 2 cranes, a small landscape, 2 rocks to either side, a group of rocks in the middle, group of plants. It's badly damaged, as you can see, so we don't know whether actually these were flowering plants or not, but they are, it represents a landscape setting for them. The crane on the left is the best preserved. It shows the contour lines, giving us in the particularly coming down on it appears it's on the nape here, but it's part of the neck of the crane. 2 wings overlapping each other, conventions for the way in which the various feathers overlap each other, where the ends of the wing feathers, these black feathers, come out at the end. The wings are slightly raised, and we can see the tail of the bird here, very carefully described with the legs and the feet of the bird walking and turning its head back. We don't know how this very similarly executed the same wings, the black feathers at the end of the wings, similarly treated, but we don't know what the head is doing here, whether it's coming forward or going or looking forward or looking here, or if they're both looking in the same direction. One of the most interesting things about this is that there is a border around it, a slightly reddish colored border. It has been suggested that this is a simulation of an actual painting that representing something that would have probably hung in an actual building, and sorry, let me go back to that, in a building, and that it is, again, a simulation of a painting. Now, I'll look at a detail here a little bit more, but on the right-hand side, you get the other object that I want to address here at the beginning, which is just 2 years earlier, and which we'll come to, but we're looking at some drawings taken from a sarcophagus of the Empress Shanchuan and bird flower type or Zhangxuan bird flower type compositions. Let's look again just at that detail and what I had been describing for you, so you can see a little bit more clearly how well developed the description of the birds are, or well developed as the description of all parts of the birds are done. And that, again, we get a sense of the lives of these birds. Now, being right as you come down into the tomb, cranes have a very important place from early on. They were represented the vehicle for the ascension of the deceased soul to a kind of post-mortem immortality. And they are quite specifically the red capped red feathers at the top of the head of the Manchurian crane coming from Northeast Asia. So we get, and here we get in this. We get the sense that this is well developed, and there may have been precedents for it, which we don't have. But there is a very famous painter, Xuanhe, who was active at the end of the 7th, right up until 713. And he is credited as, in the history, as doing the first set of 6-panel screens of cranes. And we're going to see some of those appear for us. We also get a sense in the descriptions of a 11th century poet who visited with a place where there were pictures by Xuanhe, and he described them. And one of the descriptions is quite close to described bird that we see here. We also find that other descriptions of another painter in the 10th century, Wang Chuan, who was known as comes down to us as one of the greatest of all flower and bird painters, that descriptions of his paintings, also screens of 6 panels. One of the descriptions very much fits exactly what we see in the crane here. So there's presumably precedent, and the only precedents that we can deal with are a few things that come from the early part of the 7th, early part of the 8th century. We get a picture of a crane here, sailing among clouds. This comes from a collateral branch of the imperial family, the Prince of Huaiyang, Wei Jiong, and this is dated to 709. We get a sense of again the conventions, the way in which the wings are described, the feathers, the use of contours, again the sense of the legs coming out here in flight. That this is understood. It's observed. More spectacularly, some birds that appear in a tomb just a year later, 710. This from the tomb of Li Chongjun. He was the crown prince Jiemin. And we get these cranes converting these are in the ceiling panels, where they would again be this kind of vehicle for the birds, for the soul to ascend to the realms of the immortals. And we see here that very much by this point in the first decade or so, this is just at the time that Xueji was alive, we get the kinds of conventions and the ways in which the layers of feathers on the wings are done. Those tail feathers here, not quite so strong as black, and this with the bird then that is in flight and turning its head down. Here we get another bird in flight, and again turning its head, and the head coming up, again among clouds in the sky. So we can sense that already probably Xueji played an important role in what we see in the tomb of the Daojian. And I want to stress again here from another tomb from the early part of the 8th century that there were compositions showing figures, rocks, trees, a bird here, and again similarly executed from the early part of the 8th century. But this representing an actual painting is at present the first evidence that we have for what an actual painting indicating with the frame would have looked like. So it becomes a very important, at present, a very important example for us of this beginnings of in what we see as already a really well-developed genre of flower and bird painting. The sarcophagus of the Empress comes again 2 years earlier, 737. Here, the tomb had been robbed, and the robbers coming into the tomb had this in recent time, within the last few decades. They had gone in, they had totally dismantled the stones of this sarcophagus and had taken it out of the tomb, got it to Hong Kong, went on to the international art market, and some things made it as far as the United States before the authorities reclaimed it. It's now back in Xi'an, and it's in the museum, in the main historical museum in Xi'an. What we can see is it's a house-shaped sarcophagus, and you can see here in the front, you can see the drawing of the front. You get the doors and the windows here, and a considerable amount of floral decor giving on the columns of it. On the back side and on the sides, you get double panels of compositions of flowers, birds, and again surrounded by elaborate carvings on the wall. Now here are better images where you can get a good sense of the way in which these compositions are worked out. They are centralized around generally a bird and flower composition, or some flowering, some just perhaps with fruits on them. as a central part of each composition. The birds are all in the area of the foreground. We get identifiable plants and identifiable birds, ducks, and you can see here, for instance, the duck is profile head, basically generally firm contour lines for describing the body, the feathers on the wings and in the tail feathers, all of these again outlined, contoured. Bird here stepping and turning, exposing the breast, and we see the underside of the wing, again in several layers of feathers, each feather unit described and contoured. This is quite unusual to figure out what's going on, two rocks in the foreground, but the bird is seemingly exposing its breast, and we are looking at the undersides of the wings. All of the heads seem to be in profile here, but it's kind of unclear exactly what the bird is doing. And then a small profile of a bird here with other plants around it. Two more birds, again, this possibly in flight. The wings are open. We don't see any feet. Again, profile head, the detail of all the feathers. This, again, interesting, in flight, turning, profile head, and the tail feathers coming up. All of the compositions have butterflies or other insects around the upper portions of it, coming in on the flowers or just on the bushes themselves. And again, varieties that can be identified as again, well observed. So these, along with the two cranes, these are very well articulated compositions. And it's quite interesting. We have this as a dated example from the 730s. And when we began to look at the spread of Chinese culture under the Tang dynasty through the 7th and 8th centuries, if we turn to the east, as far as Japan, we find just in the middle of the 8th century, not even 2 decades later, a screen. This is one panel from a 6-panel screen depicting birds and flowers within the painting. And this is a very special thing. It's not painted, it's a resist dye of using boards that are clamped together to produce the design. And that in Japanese is here, kyo-kechi. So we can see almost immediately from the examples we've seen in China, the spread of this compositional type, and that it is found in Japan. If we look to we were dealing with things that were in the Chinese capital, present-day city of Xi'an, and if we turn to the west and go out onto the Silk Road area, one of the first locations we come to is the oasis of Turfan. And there we have the extraordinary survival of a 3-panel screen composition, again, giving us the borders in red, making the 3 panels. This is on paper, and there's sections of paper that are all joined together to create the piece, the screen. Interestingly, this was found in a tomb that dates to the 6th century, but it was all wadded up. And the archaeologists have suggested that when early on grave robbers were in the tombs, that they had found this in another tomb from the 8th century and had simply wadded it up and then discarded it when they found other things in the tomb that they were robbing and just left it there. So again, we don't know how this was hung. Was it pasted to the wall? Was the paper actually hung in some way? It's not clear. And it's badly damaged, but the very same kinds of birds that we've seen from the sarcophagus of the emperor, empress, we get a bird walking here, head in profile, another bird just taking off, or just alighting, but legs pulled up. The feathers on the wings in rows described, the head again in profile. Here we're seeing the back of a bird, presumably in flight, again, head in profile, and the 3 rows of the feathers, and the use of a color wash separating the first row from the bottom row. Here, badly damaged, but we get a bird that's walking, very nice detail of the 1 foot down, 1 foot raised. And then coming out from this, we get a long tail of the bird and the way in which that is done. Again, important contours for the bird and contours for the wings. The third panel shows a tree trunk, old tree, and you get the base of the tree and the nodding, and then the bird, we don't know exactly. The head seems to be turning, the black hooded head, but we don't get the actual beak, so it's not exactly clear. But once again, we see the breast, and we get to see the outlines or the contours, creating the description of the wings for us. We're seeing them from the underside of the wing, and then the long tail of the bird. The flowers are also beautifully executed with the application of color. The flowers in various aspects, turning, some of them open, coming out. We get to see the sepals, we get to see the red color applied to the tops of leaves. And as in the sarcophagus of the empress, there are insects flying around. And in this case, we also have in 2 of the panels suggestion of distance with these reddish color washes and just a hint of blue in it. So it begins to create a further sense of composition for this. And again, this is a very rare example because we actually get to see brushwork on paper from this tomb from, and again, it's at a site called, in a graveyard called Halahujo. Also from the area of the Turfan Oasis, there's a graveyard at Astana. And here, this is now a 6-panel screen. Again, we can identify that it is a simulation of a screen with the red borders. We get now a more developed sense of this. It may be early 9th century as opposed to late 8th. Individual birds. In this case, the birds overlap with the plants behind them. And we get a sense of the ground with the greenish colors and the placement of the rocks. Again, identified birds. There are mallards, there is a mandarin duck, there's a pheasant. And we can see with the birds, with the plants, the flowering plants, that we get a good sense of a somewhat simpler design, but a good sense that this fits into what is now given to us as a landscape setting with distant mountains, bluish clouds, this reddish color, and this sense of distance accented by the birds that are in an inverted V shape flying into the distance towards that. So it creates now for us an organized sense of the landscape setting, the space in which the screens appear, or which the birds and flowers appear in the screens. So these examples, all coming from the period of the 8th and into the 9th century, they tell us of an advanced sense of the way in which this genre has already developed by the end of the Tang period, by the end of the 9th and into the 10th century. We can follow this by looking to a tomb which dates to the early part of the 10th century. Here, it's the tomb of Wang Chuzhi. It's dated to 924. He had died the previous year, and the tomb then, when it was excavated, it had also, just prior to excavation, had been robbed, and maybe twice. And the robbers had broken in and come down through this hole in the ceiling, and they were primarily interested in taking and chopping out these sculptural units, which were around the just coming into the area of the dome of the tomb. Those, again, some of them appeared on the Hong Kong market, some of them made it to Christie's in New York. They have been reclaimed, and they're back. Most of them are back in China now. For art historians, the tomb was particularly important because of a large landscape that, again, simulated probably a screen that separated the first chamber of the tomb from the second chamber of the tomb. And the tomb robbers had broken through that to get into the back chamber. The tomb epitaph is here in the foreground. Now, the landscape is often talked about, but what is not talked about are the presence of cranes in the upper register here, and then flower and bird compositions in the lower register. And let's look at some details there. Here you can see this would be the east wall of the tomb, and the cranes are generally, they are all proceeding out towards the entry of the tomb. This is from the opposite wall, so we get here 2 cranes in flight. We get amid these auspicious clouds, and they are going back to what we had seen from the early 8th century. We can see that persists, and again, we get the same basic conventions for the way in which the bird will be depicted, the way in which the wings are done, the way in which the tail feathers of the birds are done, and the color survives well here, and so with a red-crowned crane is quite clear for us. The bird flower compositions go all the way around in the lower register, going around, turning the corners. So here would be from the east wall, turning the corner into the area of the north wall, and then on the other side. And I have here a detail coming from the other side where you can see how this, again, the composition has been worked out. We get just a suggestion of land here, a little greenery at the bottom where the central axis of the flowering plant appears, quite symmetrical, as you can see, defining the axis. And then again, the insects and butterflies flying around at the top. The bird that we can see here in the area of the foreground is following the exact same kinds of conventions. Black hooded bird, head seen in profile, the body of the breast of the bird, all of it is contoured, and the inner wings, the patterns of the wings also contoured. Now, remarkable in this tomb, because we're getting getting cranes, we're getting flower bird compositions. Where they broke through the wall, through that landscape painting into the back room, there were large compositions of flower bird paintings on both the east and the west wall. They are badly deteriorated, and they're not, the images are not published. But on the north wall, and again, the north-south axis of the tomb, the north wall is important. It was in early tombs, this had been where fearsome animals had appeared protecting the tomb. But on that north wall, we get a wonderful bird and flower composition with floral type pattern scrolls in these sort of rondels and medallions at the top. But then this large composition, 2 plants framing on either side, a group of 4 birds coming across in the bottom, 4 birds flying here. The ones with very long tails may possibly be what in later Chinese bird and flower painting is known as the shou dai niao, the bird with a long tail. But the shou in that is also for longevity. So it may be that, and again, beautifully described butterflies, and then in the immediate foreground and overlapping a peony is a garden rock, foraminate garden rock. And the birds, each in different aspects, pecking, looking, coming down. I have a different picture of this with different lighting, but at least you can get here the sense of how beautifully the peonies have been done in this painting. We get side views of them. We get the open view of the petals and these kind of scalloped edges of the petals, seen sort of head-on, 3/4 type things. A wonderful butterfly, flying around. And again, now this overlaps. It appears as though the birds are all on the same basic ground line with the rock. So again, there's a sense of integration of space being created by the overlapping of the leaves and of the flowers and of the stems of the peony plant. So this becomes again a fully developed composition that we can see right from the beginning of the 10th century. And this during what the period from after 907 to the 960s is the period, it's called the Five Dynasties. And so Wang was an important official under the Tang and under a dynasty called the later Liang dynasty. And he held high position. And so he has a very fine tomb. And again, in the important position in north wall of the inner chamber is a flower and bird composition. Now I want to follow these with images that come from a little bit later in time, and again over 2 centuries, but we can see continuity with cranes and with the bird flower compositions. We'll look to several things. We'll look to some tombs that are north of Beijing from Xuanhe, and look at two tombs there, and then I want to go a little bit further to the west, to the modern city of Taiyuan, which was the western capital of the Liao, and look at one fine painting from that area. Here from the tomb there's the Zhang family tombs at Xuanhe. This is Zhang Shigu. He died in 1108, but the tomb was not built until several years later, so in 1117. So we're already into the early part of the 12th century. And I don't have a good picture of this, but there is, again, a 6-panel screen done with the reddish borders. And here we combine cranes with garden rocks and these centralized flower units. And you can see it better in the details here. The cranes are in similar attitudes, similar postures of preening, turning the neck to preen the feathers, open wings, crying or perhaps even dancing, and other, again, specified attitudes that the postures that the birds took. We see again the red flowers, the red pigment here has survived quite well, better than the leaves. But there are also butterflies flying. So this is the composition. Now we're dealing with early part of the 12th century for something that we had seen defined in the already in the middle of the 8th century. From this same group of tombs, this a little bit earlier in date, the Zhang member of the Zhang family, Zhang Huangzheng, had died in 1058. The tomb dates from 1093. And we get on the adjacent walls to, it's a circular space in the tomb, and on the adjacent walls to the entry into the north, we get, this we see on the west wall, we see again a full-size crane, in relation to the standing figure that's depicted here. This is quite large composition, and we see the crane walking through various grasses that are the types of grasses that grow sort of on the margins of a lake, and the bird is advancing through that. And again, a particular kind of movement of the neck, and some of the things that we'd seen right from the beginning of this, these strong contour lines, the black feathers at the end of the wings, the red cap of the bird, and clearly defined, clearly described the flora that goes with the crane in the tomb. Now, again, this from Xuanhe, dated to the late 11th century. Also from the 12th century is a depiction of a 4-panel screen just with cranes. And again, the same kinds of postures, the same kind of movement of the bird, the crane preening its feathers here, reaching down to, sometimes this is likened or spoken of as the bird looking for lichen. But this is set up in such a way that you see bed curtains, and then you see a kind of bed couch, in this case red lacquer, with what appear to be metal joins and hinges and designs to the couch. And we get a sense then again how a 4-panel screen could be within a kind of bedroom-like setting. With this, let me just move. We can look at this screen, and we can look. We have descriptions of this 10th century painter I mentioned already, Huang, and he is being copied in an album which is presumably in Japan, but hasn't been published since the 1920s, that shows where the Emperor Huizong of the late Northern Song, he was on the throne from 1101 to 1126, he is doing 6 cranes after Huang. And we get, again, these very specific postures. There are various descriptions of this in sources from the 11th century of his paintings. But we get this same bird turning his head, preening his feathers, crying to the heavens. This walking and looking down, maybe again for lichen. This also is often described as a screeching crane as a warning. This is often called a dancing crane. We know that cranes were considered to be important pets. They were raised, particularly by members of the educated elite. And again, always this link to immortality and to using the crane as the link to the realms as a vehicle for the realms of the immortals. So from this, I want to turn back to now a painting which was actually found, a silk painting found in a tomb along with a landscape. It's from the Liao dynasty. It's been dated to, based on the construction of the tomb, to around 980. It's now in the Liaoning Provincial Museum in northeast China. The descriptive title that it's given is Bamboo, Sparrows, and Hares. But it is a hanging scroll. It had collapsed, but all of the mounting and the ties and things were there, but it had just simply fallen down within the tomb. It gives us it's again something similar to what we've been experiencing in terms that it's a centralized composition. The 2 hares on either side help to focus in the 3 plants, and then bamboo and 3 birds within the branches of the bamboo. The bamboo, as you can see here, is without color. It's simply in an outline technique, and that is different from the flowers, which are in very strong color. They have been identified as Chinese Pusatella and Chinese foxglove and dandelion. And in this case, the color has been combined with white pigment, and where there would have been more clearly evident contour lines for the leaves, that has been obscured by the thick application of color. The birds also had the application of white pigment. Most of it has flaked off, but in the bird here, we can see a bird that preening the feathers. We see the back of the body. Again, we get the contour line of the bird. We get one of the wings coming out, and we're getting just a sense of that kind of fluffed body of the bird as the bird again is preening its feathers. Here, the white color remains more clearer, where we can see how the white pigment has also given us the contours and gives us the lines of the wings. They are pulled back. The bird is looking down, and the tail feathers come out. Here is the detail for the plants, and you can see that this juxtaposition of using this technique for just outlining the bamboo, shuanggo, the double outline, and then these thicker color and thicker application of color in the leaves of the three plants. There's a later term in Chinese which describes a kind of boneless painting, which means that the contour lines are not there, that it's mostly wash, and that is mogu in Chinese. But with a different character, it can also mean sunken contours, and it's possible that and that also appears in text, it's that what we see here with the thick application of color covering over the original line work, the original lineament that described the contours of the leaves. It's possible that that's what we see here. The hares are quite wonderful in the foreground of the painting. They are done in just a kind of rough hatching strokes. There's some contouring, and the hatching tends to obscure it, but you get it on the belly of the birds here, and of the hares here, and you get the sense of their one is eating, and they get their sense of presence and liveliness within the scene. But there's no full sense of body. You'll get a sense of the way in which the eyes see here, sort of flat against the hair itself. One other thing that this develops the kind of ground and the plants in the ground and depictions of the ground level that was the kind of thing that we saw from the tomb at Astana. So that the developments of that kind of spatial organization is here, but there is nothing, no distance, nothing that tells us that there are mountains or clouds in the sky within the painting. Now, this picture can be juxtaposed against a surviving painting which had been in the imperial collection of the Xuanhe painting catalog. It's cataloged there from around 1120, and it has an inscription here. It was mounted so that it could be rolled out, and so the inscription here starts here and writes down. This in the distinctive style of the Emperor Huizong. It was the kind of writing that his courtiers did, or his academy painters did in the process of cataloging images. It is a hanging scroll, and we can sense that we are dealing now with something which takes us, if this is from around 1120, or in the first, probably second decade of the 12th century, and if we accept, and this is where the title comes from. So this blue magpie, thornbush, and sparrows. That's the title that was given to it in the catalog, and the name of a painter, Huang Jucai, is given to us in this title. There is no signature, there are no seals of Huang on the painting. So we have to accept the attribution as given here. If everything is right about the attribution and the painting, it should come from this period, probably in the second half of the 10th century, which would roughly correspond to this artisan working in the tomb in Liaoning. This would have been created for the Song, presumably for the Song court. And you'll see in a minute, I mentioned that there was the great painter of cranes, Huang Jucai in the 10th century, Huang Chuan in the 10th century, and Huang Jucai is one of his sons. We look and compare back and forth. We get this very worked out composition of a group of flat rocks and grasses here in the corner, a group of overlapping rocks where the blue magpie is perched. Again, a succession of rocks that take us from moving from the right towards the center of the painting, a succession of banks along a river, that again giving us a good spatial sense. There is a type of reddish fern here and thorn bush. And again, we get a sequence of birds perched in the branches of the thornbirds and other birds in flight approaching it, smaller and presumably meant to be in the distance within the painting. I have some details of the birds here that you can look at, And you can see that some of the conventions, the very conventions that we had seen in the Tang period, when the wings, the contours and here the wings, again, it's a line demarcating the edges of the feathers. And we see that again here and here. And various postures, various attitudes of the birds. These two seem to be engaged in some way. Look at the tail here. This bird is a little confusing. The head is in profile, and the tail, it's a little unclear. We're looking at the wings. It appears we're looking at the top of the wings. And yet the posture seems a little bit as though the bird would be landing and not taking off, but it's in flight here. The head a little bit large for the body. Here, this wonderful depiction of a bird perched and looking down, perhaps for prey within the painting. The bird here turning its breast, so as it turns its head, and we get some, again, description, and the contour lines, all even lines defining the body. This is one of the smaller distant birds that you see here approaching, and the other one from the other side. The blue magpie here, this is a specific thing. It's not like the regular magpie. This is a very mountain magpie, which is a special bird in China. It has a red beak and red legs, a black hood, and a white crest. And we see this again, the contour is very important for the overall description of the bird. That true also of the way in which all the feathers are dealt with on the wings, and in these long tail feathers and the subsidiary feathers that come in conjunction with the tail feathers. So it's a very carefully described bird. Now there is a text from the 11th century that it relates to the kind of things that we're seeing here, in which the author sets out the depiction of birds and the way in which the careful description of something. It's kind of called painting from life or sketching from life. And the author is very clear in giving us this detailed information. He says, in painting feathered creatures, one must by all means be well acquainted with the body forms of the various birds and their nomenclature. To begin with, there are the bill and the mouth, the face and the eyelids, the so-called thicket down on the head, and the rain cape down on the back. Wings have a tip section and an oyster-shaped section. The wing as a whole has its top, at its top, the large and small joints of the bony framework, and then large and small covering feathers leading out to the 6 tips. There are also such plumage areas as the wind measurers or the grass robbers filling in between the wings. The fanning feathers of the tail, they're the tail squeezers, and the down of the belly, the leg feathers, and the tail point. Feet include picking up claws with 3 joints, eating claws with 2 joints, grasping claws with 4 joints, carrying claws with 1 joint, and the so-called spreading yellow, that's the integument in between, say, like a duck of the legs. And then specifically, birds like the mountain magpie and the pheasant all show differences in body down, eyes, claws, depending on the seasons of the year and on their age. Everything mentioned above in my discussion has its own terminology, form, and position, all of which must be clearly understood. In no particular is a lapse permissible. So we get a sense of this very clear understanding of and discussion of the way in which the birds should be depicted, and that the We get a sense of particular schools in the writing of this author, Goro Xu, his experiences in painting. And he gives us a distinction in terms of geographical types of schools of painting. So again, we're getting a sense, this is already in the second half of the 11th century, we're getting a very clear sense of the development of the flower and bird paintings. He will distinguish between the Huang family and the father and the son, Huang Chan, and the son here, Huang Jucai, both of whom had served in what is now modern Sichuan, that's where the kingdom of Shu was located. And he distinguishes between the Huang family and a painter who is Shu Xi, who is painted in the Jiangnan region, this area around Shanghai, Suzhou, that region of China. And he makes a clear distinction. He says that Huang Chuan and his son Huang Jucai, both of whom served the southwestern state of Shu before the Song unification, and differences from Shu Xi, a retired scholar from Jiangnan during the southern Tang dynasty. This is one of the, before the unification of the Song dynasty in 960. Southern Tang actually lasted a little bit longer. But the Huangs were seen as persons of wealth and position, and thus in structure and spirit, their feathered creatures stress an opulent fullness. Shu Xi, by contrast, was a recluse, noble in character and independent and unconventional. In formal structure, his feathered creatures emphasize a light beauty. And Guo concludes, in my tentative differentiation between the practices of the two schools, there is also this important train of thought that, in broadly speaking, the art of the Jiangnan, these eastern, again, Shanghai region painters, usually fell below that of the men of Shu in structure and spirit, while it surpassed them in sublimity and freedom. So that's the origin of my title. In Blue Magpie and Thornbush, and sparrows, if that can be taken to represent the spirit and structure and spirit of Huang Chuan and his son Huang Jucai, then sublimity and freedom of the school of Shu Xi remains much more difficult for us to define. There are no surviving paintings that help us to know what Shu Xi actually painted. This one painting that I put here on the screen is a picture often associated with Shu Xi. One of our colleagues says that it's signed. It's not. There's a note, there is some calligraphy on it, but it deals with the price of the painting as opposed to a signature. But we don't really know about Shu Xi. We don't have a sense of what his works are. It's referred to, but again, this is often cited as him, but what his sublimity and freedom were remain difficult for us to define. So we can get that sense. This is all in discussion, and the way in which flower and bird painting was being talked about in the 10th century. Now, if we go from this to a comparison, there is one painter who does stand out and for whom works do survive, and this is the painter Cui Bai. And he was in the catalogue of the imperial collection around 1120. Several times it's mentioned that when Cui Bai appeared, the Huang style was the dominant style of the Painting Academy. But after he appeared, there were significant changes, that he changed the painting in the Academy, changed radically. Now, Cui was a painter. He came from Anhui province, and he came to the Song court. He was awarded a position as a painter, an apprenticeship in the Painting Academy. But he soon resigned his position because he felt too constrained, and he is said to have ultimately painted pretty much solely at the request of the emperor. And we can perhaps get a sense of what the radical change that he brought to the Academy is. There are, again, two paintings that survive, one in the Palace Museum in Taipei, and the other, the National Palace Museum in Taipei, and the other in the Palace Museum in Beijing. The painting in Taipei, here, this magpies in hair, it's a hanging scroll. It has an inscription on it that dates it, and it comes just in the middle decades in 1061, in the middle decades of the 11th century. We get here now, if you compare this, if this represents the Huang style and it should be a late 10th century painting, and this is mid-11th century. You can see again the kind of development for the way in which compositions are done and breaking away from these centralized compositions to something which is more syncopated type of composition. We get two magpies, this one flying in, we'll look at a detail in a minute, flying in, and this one already perched, and they are screeching, and he seems to be screeching down, and the hare here turns its head up almost in surprise within it. And we get a clear sense of movement bringing us down to the pair. The oak leaves here, and these banks bring us back up, and we pick up with the trunk of the tree coming up, so that a kind of circular sense is developed within the composition. It's carefully articulated, carefully worked out in the way in which it is done. Here are some of the details that you can see the bird in flight. This is again quite nicely worked out, so that we get the open wings. We see the top of this wing, the underside of this wing, the belly of the bird, and then the back of the tail feathers as it is flying in to perch. And then the one that is perched here already, you can get a sense of this the strength of his calling voice as he looks down towards the rabbit. Let me point out while we've got this on the screen here, because I don't have a better detail of it, but the trunk of the tree here, again, dealing with contour lines and getting the gnarled trunk of the tree with knots, and this is an autumn scene. The color of the leaves has already changed. The oak leaves here in the foreground are bending with the wind. And we get with the bamboo now painted and colored in green, so not the kind of just simple outline of bamboo, but giving us a sense of observation and naturalness within the landscape itself. And you can get a sense of the detail of the trunks here. And then the detail of the rabbit, and particularly of the land conformations here, these broad strokes suggesting the earthen banks, and the rabbit then, the hare with longer ears is, as you look at the detail of this, we don't see the kind of contours that we see within the depictions of the birds. And this gives us a sense of kind of an optical sense of the hare's body. It helps to suggest something of it in the atmosphere in which the hare exists. And that is perhaps something that tells us a little bit about the radical change that Xuanhe may have brought. We can see that similar in a hand scroll by Xuanhe, this in the Palace Museum in Beijing. It gives us just a cut across of a tree trunk executed in a similar way, and you can see in the details here, again with contours and the ink within the trunks and the way in which the knots within the branches are done. We get a bird arriving here in flight, coming in towards a bird which is perched in such a way that we see it's perched. We're looking at the underside of the bird and his head turning up, and then a pair of birds here, one looking towards this bird, the other looking over towards the birds on the branch here. And there's a kind of interaction. Again, it's a kind of syncopated movement coming through the hand scroll. And very nice in this detail here, you can see that there's no outer contour. Again, it's just the softer edge of the feathers that helps to create that sense of the body of the bird. It gives a kind of an optical quality, as if surrounded by atmosphere in the painting. And I think that this is probably what was being happening in the when they said that Xuanhe brought about a radical change within the academy. So these two paintings, this is not dated, but it is signed by the painter right here, Xuanhe. So Xuanhe, the Huang family style, the richness and broad color of that, and along with whatever was Shuxi, that is the kind of painting that appears in the early 12th century when Emperor Huizong in 1101 comes onto the throne. This is a very large painting. It's about 12 feet in height. It's the kind of interior decoration that was used within the Northern Song court palaces. As we'll look at a few details, it's a very elegant painting. But you can sense that there is the quality of the overall composition and the way in which this was laid out and the playing and movement within the picture. This is a little more static, and that is typical of what happens with the change in taste when Emperor Huizong came on the throne. This becomes a kind of, it's like a lattice work, and it's just, the birds are displayed here, and they don't have that sense of atmosphere about them. We get a pair of grow beaks here at the top of the painting here, and then a pair of green pheasants and another pair of birds here, and there's one single bird coming out at this point. The bamboo, again, now still done in color, but this lattice work is very carefully worked out, but the whole thing takes on again, I've used the word elegant, but it takes on the appearance now that this is really conceived of as kind of art for the sake of art. It's something which is highly decorative in its way. One aspect of it, which is particularly curious to me, is, and may be this influence coming from the very broad strokes of Xuanhe's painting, is the way in which the rocks surfaces are done here. And this is not all that clear, and it flattens on the surface of the rock. So we get tree trunks, which are again in the trunk of the tree, the old trees. This again may have come from Xuanhe and back to the Huangs within the painting. So it's an amalgam of these various trends that were typical of the early part of the 12th century. And it's that, and I'll bring a small painting to juxtapose against it. It's this type of painting which really sets the foundation for later Chinese flower and bird painting, particularly as practiced in the court atmosphere. And I do this just because, again, if this painting is about 12 feet in height, this is just a small fan, and the kind of thing that would have been held in the hand and looked at and admired. And again, it's very carefully done, worked out with the intertwining branches, but again, it takes on this kind of the same kind of overall flatness that we see in the large painting. So this brings us up to this point in the 12th beginning of the 12th century, and I'll just to conclude. I have just a few more things, and I'll keep you here for that. Well, I turn to see what happened afterwards. Sorry, that should not have happened. Sorry. Review in passing. Okay, so what we get that comes immediately after this, the Mongols come into China in the 13th century and defeat the southern Song court in the 1279, but they had taken over in North China already by an established government in Beijing by the 1260s. And when they come, that means that there's no court patronage for this. Let me get this back to. There's no court patronage for the type of painting that we see here on the left-hand side. It persists. Even if you look at this, the magpies, the way in which the composition is worked out, this in a way goes back to Cui Bai's image of the magpies and hares. We've got a single magpie here and two magpies fighting, and again there are tension lines set up between them, and then the rocks come and frame and make for a very elegant composition. But in this, the painter Meng Yujian was active in the early part of the 14th century, and again he's having to deal with the changed world of patronage under the Mongols, and there's no longer court patronage for his kind of painting. Another side to flower and bird painting that we see here is from a painter who did paintings in this way, but also painted in a manner using ink only or ink in very light color, which was favored by scholar painters. And the subjects of the Song who were left over, who weren't necessarily serving in government, they're the type who patronize this kind of painting, and they are quite specifically looking back to earlier paintings, like this 10th century example. So we get, and that is mentioned in the inscription here. So we get a worked out foreground, the scholarly rocks, the foraminate rocks, a thorn bush with bamboo, and then birds in the top. So it's making conscious reference to this kind of painting. So this, again, from the period of the mid into the during the first half of the 14th century. And when we find China reunited and the Mongols thrown out under the Ming dynasty, the founding of the Ming dynasty in 1368, we get a court painter here in a dated work of 1413, where here the court style of the early 12th century is the source for this type of image, and this has become sort of overcrowded because we get a pine, we get bamboo, we get plum, the three friends of winter, and here also the 100 birds, and they are just arrayed as if being set out for us in the trees, as we saw in the early 12th century painting. So it's a revival of that kind of painting, and this under the patronage of the Ming court. So the Ming court is returning to the kinds of things seen in the 11th century. Finally, these two paintings are right at the entry to the exhibition that you can see upstairs if you haven't already. We get an important court painter here, Du Ji, working here basically in ink only. There are 4 magpies here, and this is the source for the title of calling it the 4 magpies. But it's also, it's a purely descriptive title, but it's also called the 4 blessings because the Chinese for magpie, Xi Chue, the Xi is the character for happiness, and so it's sometimes also called the 4 happinesses. But that doesn't really tell us what's happening in the painting. We get elements of the picture, pine tree going out, coming back in, another tree branch coming here and going out and coming back in, framing this action here. But two eagles, what are they doing? What is the waterfall here? What's actually going on in this painting? And it's very possible that what we see is a title that we know that Lu Ji painted, which was Yingming, meaning the ruler, the sagacious ruler, Tingjian, which is to heed advice. And so it's very possible that that's what is represented here, members of the court offering advice to the ruler. But Yingming, Tingjian, the Tingjian is also to listen to the sound of the waterfall. It's a pun. So we get various rebuses within the painting. And I think that helps to explain that there is a political nature to the picture. We know that the emperor who patronized him told his son, the future emperor, heed what the messages are in Lu Ji's paintings. This is a painting on the left-hand side. He's much later in date. He is from the late 17th into the early 18th century. But here we get a kind of colored painting that goes back to the 12th century types of pictures, plum, bamboo. Within the painting, the birds here are the sorry, totally escaping me right now. They are the birds that mate for life. So there is that sense of mandarin ducks. They're the birds that mate for life. And they are seen here, the male and the female, and in an auspicious type of painting with bamboo and its sense of the hollow core of the bamboo, but the firmness of the bamboo and the way in which it bends but doesn't break. Its loyalty, that aspect, and the plum appearing as harbingers of spring. So it's a very auspicious type of painting. So I've kept you for a long time now, and I'm thank you for your indulgence in listening through all of this. But this, at least in this coda, brings you up to where bird and flower painting is at the beginning of the exhibition, and you can go and look, and you'll see the way in which bird and flower painting, flower and bird painting unfolds during the centuries of from 15th century through into 18th, 19th century in the paintings that are selected in the show. So thank you very much. And I guess if there are questions, I would be happy to. Or if you're all tired and worn out, you can get and leave.
Thank you so much for this wonderful talk. Yes, it's a lot of the rare pieces that we only see through photographs, especially from the archaeological sites. And so, yes. Do you know what kind of material they use for the wall painting?
The wall paintings, they're plastered surfaces, and in some cases there is a support behind the wall painting surface before it's smoothed out, which sometimes involves working with organic materials to help the support for it and keep it in place. The one group of things, the pigments are very white in that, particularly in Wang Tuzhi's tomb, and so that really sets off the flowers in that tomb. But they tend to be, again, it's a kind of plaster onto the surface of the.
Are they all colored?
No, generally they're not colored. Yeah.
Can you please use the microphone, because this is being recorded for YouTube.
Okay.
So if you ask a question, you don't speak in the mic. Nobody knows when they're watching the film later what you asked. So it really helps us, please.
In some of your examples of the Tang tombs, there's a red frame Is there a significance to the color or the frame itself?
Well, the significance to the frame is that it tells us that they were representative of actual screens, and the actual screens had reddish colored frames. So
And-
that's important. What the meaning of the red color is, I don't know exactly.
So we don't necessarily know the meaning of the frame on the screens.
Well, the meaning of the frame, it tells us that these were actual, where they were painted on the wall, that they were representing actual things that would have been used in daily life. But here we get a simulation
Yeah.
of that in the wall painting itself. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Anybody else? Well, we hope we'll see you next week.
Yes, for Professor Sturman, so you can.
We'll provide, a very enlightening talk on a totally different aspect of the Chinese painting, and especially the flower and bird. And this is only one aspect of it. And thank you so much for the history.